In the age before legends were written, there was a moment when the world stood on the edge of destiny. Kingdoms watched the horizon in fear, warriors felt the weight of an unseen storm, and every heartbeat echoed with the promise of an approaching clash. Far across the silent lands, a power long forgotten began to awaken, shaking the roots of empires and stirring the courage of those destined to rise. The wind carried warnings, the earth trembled softly, and shadows stretched as if preparing for the great conflict to come. This is the story of choices that shaped nations, of heroes forged in fire, and of a battle that would rewrite the fate of the world. The drums of war are calling, and once they begin, nothing will ever be the same. Across medieval Europe, justice was no longer a symbol of order, it had become a spectacle of fear. Kings, nobles, and church authorities believed that punishment must not only correct the guilty, but terrify every soul who watched. And so, execution evolved into something far darker than a sentence. It became a message carved into the memory of entire nations. Villagers gathered in silent dread as the instruments of judgment appeared, each one crafted with a purpose far beyond ending life. These were devices designed to break the will, crush the spirit, and remind the world that power belonged to those who control fear. From the stone courtyards of ancient fortresses to the crowded markets where public punishments unfolded, people witnessed horrors that pushed the very limits of imagination. But beneath the cruelty lay a deeper truth: every method carried a story. A belief, a superstition, a warning. And as the authorities tightened their grip, the boundary between justice and brutality slowly disappeared. This chapter reveals how terror became a tool, how punishment turned into performance, and how medieval Europe crossed a line that would haunt history forever. In Chapter 3, the fear of punishment reached an entirely new level, one where the mind suffered long before the body ever did. Medieval Europe learned that terror did not always require force. Sometimes, it was the anticipation that broke a person. And so emerged the most psychologically tormenting methods of all, devices and rituals designed to crush hope itself. Dark chambers beneath castles echoed with quiet footsteps, each prisoner knowing that once the heavy doors closed behind them, daylight might never return. Authorities understood that isolation, suspense, and uncertainty could do what blades could not. The slow ticking of time, the cold touch of iron, the whisper of chains sliding across stone, these became weapons more powerful than any sword. Rumors of these places traveled across kingdoms, growing with every telling. Some spoke of rooms where light never entered, others of chairs built not to injure but to exhaust the mind. For many, the fear of what might happen proved worse than any real punishment. In this chapter, we uncover how medieval Europe used silence, darkness, and imagination as instruments of control, and why these methods left scars far deeper than physical pain. Takes us into the realm of fear that kings and councils used to keep entire kingdoms under control. This was the age when punishment was not only a response to crime, but a message carved into the minds of all who witnessed it. Medieval Europe perfected the art of turning public discipline into a theater of authority, where the crowd was not just an audience, they were participants in the ritual of intimidation. In busy market squares, travelers paused, merchants silenced their bargaining, and children hid behind their parents as officials prepared the stage. These events were designed with purpose, to display power, restore order, and remind every citizen of the fate that awaited those who defied the law. Nothing happened quickly, everything unfolded slowly, deliberately, allowing fear to spread through the air like smoke from a burning torch. Some methods relied on exhaustion, others on humiliation, and some simply on forcing a person to stand before the unforgiving judgment of an entire town. The emotional pressure alone was often enough to break even the strongest spirit. Medieval rulers understood that when fear is witnessed by many, it becomes a stronger weapon than any blade or chain. In this chapter, we explore how these orchestrated public spectacles shaped the psyche of societies, controlled the population, and cemented the authority of those in power, proving that sometimes, fear itself was the most effective instrument of all. Reveals a side of medieval Europe where fear was not created by weapons or devices, but by belief. In an age ruled by superstition, people feared what they could not see far more than anything crafted by human hands. Rumors spread faster than fire, and every unexplained event was believed to be the work of dark forces, curses, or unseen spirits watching from the shadows. Authorities quickly learned to use these beliefs as tools of control. A simple accusation could change a person's fate forever, for once a community believed someone was touched by evil, no argument could save them. Villagers whispered behind closed doors, afraid to even speak the name of the accused, while church officials questioned every gesture, every word, every sign of fear. Most terrifying was the uncertainty. No one truly knew what would spark suspicion next. A strange dream, an unlucky coincidence, or even a moment of silence at the wrong time could lead to doubt. And doubt was often all it took. In this chapter, we explore how fear of the unseen shaped the actions of entire towns, how belief became a verdict, and how the invisible weight of superstition created a world where danger did not always come from enemies, but from the imagination of the people themselves. Takes us into the cold, calculated world of medieval interrogation, where the goal was not punishment, but confession, whether true or forced. These chambers were built to break the mind long before they ever touched the body. Every detail inside served a purpose. The echo of footsteps, the flicker of a torch, the heavy silence that seemed to press against the walls. Here, fear spoke louder than any question. Men and women brought into these rooms felt their courage fade with every passing second. Interrogators used patience as a weapon, allowing the silence to grow until doubt and panic began to settle deep within the heart. Sometimes, all it took was the sound of iron being moved, or the slow opening of a wooden drawer, to shatter a person's resolve. These sessions could last minutes or stretch into hours, but the design remained the same: create uncertainty, weaken hope, and let the imagination do most of the work. People often confessed not because they were guilty, but because the fear of what might follow seemed far worse than the truth itself. In this chapter, we uncover how medieval Europe turned questioning into a psychological battlefield, showing that the mind, when cornered by fear, can become its own most powerful enemy. Reveals the unsettling truth of how medieval Europe used exile, isolation, and social abandonment as punishments far more devastating than physical suffering. In a world where survival depended on community, being cast out was not simply a sentence, it was the slow erasing of a person's identity. To be exiled was to lose your family, your home, your name, and sometimes even your right to be remembered. Many feared this fate more than any physical penalty, for exile struck at the heart of what made life bearable: belonging. A single decision by a council or a whispered accusation could force someone to walk away from everything they once knew, leaving only footprints behind on a road that led to nowhere. Villagers watched silently as the condemned passed by, unable to offer comfort, for even a moment of sympathy could place them under suspicion. Isolation worked in similar ways. People were confined to empty rooms, remote towers, or abandoned outskirts of town, where silence became both companion and tormentor. Days blended into nights, and without voices, faces, or the warmth of human presence, the mind began to wander into unsettling places. Many described the feeling not as imprisonment, but as slowly disappearing. In this chapter, we explore how rulers use these quiet punishments to maintain control, proving once again that fear does not always roar, it often whispers, leaving people to battle the emptiness within. Uncovers one of the most haunting realities of medieval Europe, public shaming as a weapon of control. Unlike hidden chambers or isolated cells, this punishment unfolded under the open sky, in the center of towns where every gaze carried judgment. It was a method designed not to injure the body, but to crush the spirit, leaving wounds that lingered long after the crowds dispersed. The accused were placed where no one could ignore them: market squares, crossroads, church steps, locations chosen carefully so every passerby became part of the ritual. The silence of some spectators and the whispers of others created an atmosphere heavier than any chain. Here, humiliation was not accidental, it was a performance staged to display power, obedience, and the consequences of stepping outside the accepted order. For many, the greatest pain came not from their restraints but from the eyes watching them. Friends hesitated to approach, families looked away, strangers judged without ever knowing the truth. In these moments, a person learned how deeply reputation shaped one's place in society. A single accusation could turn admiration into avoidance, turning a respected figure into an outsider overnight. Public shaming taught an unforgettable lesson, that the fear of losing honor could control behavior more effectively than any threat of force. Medieval rulers understood this well, using shame to reinforce loyalty and remind their people that society itself could become the harshest judge. In this chapter, we explore how identity, dignity, and reputation became battlegrounds, proving that sometimes the deepest scars are the invisible ones carried in the heart. Takes us deep inside the final stage of medieval punishment, the stage where fear blended with fate, and judgment carried a weight heavier than any chain. This was the moment when a person stood face to face with the ultimate consequence of their actions, or sometimes, the actions others claimed they had done. In these tense hours, emotions ran sharper than steel: regret, disbelief, and the faint flicker of hope that perhaps mercy might still arrive. Across Europe, these moments followed a similar pattern. Towns gathered in hushed anticipation as the condemned was led forward, each step echoing through stone streets. Officials spoke in formal, unwavering tones, delivering verdicts that shaped destinies with a single sentence. For many, the true punishment was not the verdict itself, but the long pause before it was spoken, the suspense that gripped their heart, the tightening in their chest as they waited to hear the words that would define their future. Some prayed silently, others looked toward the sky as if seeking one last connection to a world that was slipping away. The crowd watched closely, each person feeling a mixture of curiosity and unease, knowing how thin the line was between the accused and themselves. In these decisive moments, medieval justice revealed its stark nature: absolute, unquestioned, and often final. Chapter 9 reminds us that the greatest power held by medieval authorities was not in enforcing punishment, but in controlling the moment just before it, when fear, silence, and uncertainty shaped the human spirit more deeply than anything that followed. Brings us to the final layer of medieval punishment, the quiet, controlled world of authority, symbolism, and irreversible consequence. This was the stage where rulers no longer relied on fear alone, they relied on ritual. Every action, every gesture, every word spoken during these final moments was carefully designed to affirm power and remind the people watching that justice, once declared, could not be undone. In the great halls of stone, decisions were delivered with solemn gravity. Candles flickered against the cold, echoing walls as officials unfolded scrolls containing the final decrees. The atmosphere grew heavy, as if the air itself paused to witness the announcement. Whether the accused stood strong or trembled with uncertainty, the outcome remained the same: the authority of the realm would be upheld, and order would be restored. People gathered not out of cruelty, but out of a deep-rooted belief that justice must be carried out in full view of the community. These gatherings reinforced trust in the system, even when many silently questioned its fairness. For those receiving judgment, this moment was a turning point, a step that marked the end of one life and the beginning of another, whether in exile, confinement, or forced service. This chapter reveals how medieval Europe used final judgments not just to punish, but to shape society's values, define loyalty, and remind every citizen that their fate rested in the hands of those who governed them. It was here, in these last moments, that justice became both an ending and a message for generations to come. As our journey through medieval Europe reaches its final moments, we step back from the shadows of its harshest punishments and look toward the deeper truth they reveal. These methods were more than tools of discipline, they were symbols of a world struggling to define order in the midst of chaos. Behind every decree stood rulers desperate to maintain control, communities shaped by fear and duty, and a society convinced that harsh justice was the only path to stability. Yet, beneath this rigid system, countless stories were left untold, stories of courage, resilience, and silent endurance. The echoes of chains, the stern voices of officials, and the weight of unforgiving laws all remind us how power shaped everyday lives. But history also teaches us that even in the darkest environments, humanity searches for meaning. People learn to adapt, question, resist, and hope. The ending of this journey is not a celebration of suffering, but a reminder of how far we have come, and how vital it is to understand the past to avoid repeating its mistakes. As we leave these ancient halls behind, the lessons remain clear. Justice without compassion becomes control, authority without balance becomes fear, and societies built on intimidation eventually crumble. The medieval world may be gone, but its warnings still stand. By reflecting on these harsh traditions, we recognize the importance of fairness, empathy, and accountability in shaping the world we live in today. The past may be distant, yet its message continues to guide us, urging us to build a future where power is used to protect, not to dominate, and where humanity leads over cruelty.